All right, we are going to head into our next portion of today's event, which is going to cover release planning. And we've got a strong team here to help us present that information today. So we've got Criswell, Promise Parker, and Melanie Rieske are here to walk us through that. And I will turn it over to you, Chris, to start us off.
Thank you, Cassie. Good morning, everyone. Thank you again for allowing us to come on here today and talk about the work that we do. We belong to the Reentry and Release Services Unit within the Oregon Department of Corrections. Our primary focus is, just as the name says, is the release of individuals that are incarcerated within the Oregon Department of Corrections, but also mainly their reentry back into their communities. Our team is made up of, we have our Reentry and Release Administrator, Amy Bertrand. We have 3 Release Services Managers, myself, Promise Parker, and Melanie Rieske. Melanie supervises release counselors primarily located on the west side of the state at the Oregon State Penitentiary, Oregon State Correctional Institution, Sandy M Correctional Institution, and then Coffee Creek Correctional Facility, which includes the medium facility, the minimum facility, as well as the intake center. I supervise release counselors mostly on the east side of the state, to include Columbia River Correctional Institution in Portland, as well as the South Fork Forest Camp out in Tillamook. Promise Parker, she supervises the transition coordinators located at most of the institutions around the state, as well as the reentry benefits team, which consists of a coordinator and 2 assisters, which are the ones I just mentioned. We have 31 release counselors located at every institution, or at least providing coverage at every institution around the state. We have 10 transition coordinators, 2 post-sentence report writers, and 1 administrative support specialist. So, as mentioned, we work alongside with adults in custody. Our work with those folks typically begins around the 6 months to the earliest release. Release counselors, as mentioned, they're located at every institution, physically at every institution except for South Fork Forest Camp. We have release counselors at the Columbia River Correctional Institution in Portland that provide coverage for that. Our main purpose for release counselors is to be a liaison with community partners, community corrections, and the board of parole and post-prison supervision. We collaborate with other Oregon Department of Corrections units, such as Christie's team with the behavioral health, as well as health services, and many others. Other agencies outside of Oregon Department of Corrections, such as community corrections. Each county has their own community corrections division, and we work with each one of those. We work with the courts located all across the state. We work with different resources, housing, employment, located all around the state as well. Transition coordinators are located at almost every institution, with the exception of Warner Creek Correctional Facility in Lakeview, as well as the South Fork Forest Camp in Tillamook. Those institutions still get coverage from transition coordinators at other institutions, just so we can make sure that all folks that are incarcerated are getting provided the same level of services. Their primary purpose is to facilitate life skill classes using the Road to Success curriculum, and they also provide one-on-one resource connections with them. Just as release counselors, they collaborate with other Department of Corrections units, other agencies, and community partners. This is a timeline of, for this purpose, I'll be speaking primarily about the release counselors. So the release counselors, they start their release planning timeline in the 6 months to the earliest release. Earliest release can be, just their regular post-prison supervision. They serve their sentence, they're getting out on the date that they're supposed to be getting out on, Or it could be, we have other programs such as the short-term transitional leave, which allows individuals to release up to 120 days early to transition back into the community. While they're on that transitional leave, they're still technically under the jurisdiction of the Oregon Department of Corrections. So if anything were to go wrong while they're on transitional leave, they'll be returned to the Department of Corrections to finish serving out their sentence. Other types of leave are non-prison leave, which goes in conjunction with what Christy was talking about as far as the alternative incarceration programs. The 180 days program that Christy mentioned, that's in the institution. Once they're finished with that portion, that 6-month portion program within the institution, the second part of that is a 90-day leave period in the community where they will continue their treatment in the community and be afforded the opportunity to transition back in their community before their actual supervision begins. So at 6 months to release, we provide a pre-release class to all individuals that are going to be releasing within the next 6 months. During this pre-release class, we're providing folks with information on what the release process timeline looks like, what to expect while they're going through the process, things that they should be doing on their end to better prepare themselves for their release into their communities. We're talking about benefits that'll be available to them, the importance of making sure that they're paying attention to any appointments that are getting scheduled for them and exactly what benefits are going to be signed up for during those appointments. We talk about what supervision is going to look like when they go out into their communities, what that's going to, how their conditions they'll be held to, what kind of housing they're allowed to, live in, what may be available to them as far as housing and resources go in their counties they're returning to. We talk about, the rules as far as, getting a county waiver, which is basically when folks are releasing they have a county that is their county that they're supposed to return to, but if they have housing options, support options, something else in a different county that's going to be a better situation for them when they release, then we can look at getting them moved to another county, which is what a county waiver is. Interstate compacts, we go over those. Interstate compact is basically, they're serving their sentence in Oregon. They're going to be releasing in Oregon for supervision. But if they have family, friends, employment, other opportunities in a state other than Oregon, then we would assist them with submitting an application for an interstate compact, which would move their supervision to a different state. So during that class, we're trying our best to provide them with as much information as possible up front to better prepare them for what's going to happen within the 4 to 6 months to release. And that's when the release counselor is going to meet with them one-on-one individually. The release counselor prior to that meeting is going to prepare their file, their release plan. They're going to get it together. They're going to determine what county that they're going to be returning to. And in that one-on-one meeting, those things are going to be discussed, and we're going to talk about what resources they already have, and then what resources can be available to them in the county they're going to, and develop a plan moving forward to get them in the best position possible for their release. 1 month to release, and again, this timeline, these are the bare minimum contacts that release counselors would have with an individual releasing. Most times there's many more contacts that are happening throughout. Anytime plans change, anytime questions come up, whatever it is, release counselors are available to meet with individuals that are releasing and work with them on whatever may come up. But 1 month to the release, it's another one-on-one meeting with the individuals. At that time, the Board of Parole and Post-Prison Supervision has typically issued what is called supervision orders, which basically lays out, when they're releasing, how long they're going to be on supervision, and what conditions they're going to be held to while on supervision. Conditions range from specific treatment that they may need to go through when they get out into the community, individuals they're not allowed to have contact with, and so on and so forth. So we're reviewing that with them. We're going through it line by line, answering any questions they have, and making sure they acknowledge what they have to do when they get out once they release. We also we work hand in hand with the Oregon Department of Human Services and sign folks up for SNAP benefits, as well as Oregon Health Plan. But for the release counselors, their part in this process is they facilitate the interview that DHS needs to do before activating their benefits for release. So all folks, when they release, they're releasing with an Oregon Trail card, and they're releasing with those SNAP benefits on their Oregon Trail card day of release. I promise is probably going to go into that more when she starts talking about the benefits of sisters, so I'm not gonna beat that up too much right now. 2 weeks to release. This is kind of the final. Let's make sure all the ducks are in a row meeting with folks. We're going to confirm any transportation arrangements, make sure that those are still in place. If they have someone, a family member, a friend, or whatever, coming to pick them up on day of release. If not, we're ordering them a bus ticket and arranging their transportation to make sure we get them to the county that they're going to. And also, it's a final opportunity just to double check again that nothing has changed. Their plans are still in place. All the boxes have been checked, and that they're ready to reenter into their communities. And that's pretty much it for the release counselor timeline. I'm going to pass it off now to Promise, who will go into more about the reentry benefits and transition coordinators.
Hi, everyone. All right, thanks, Chris. The reentry benefits team consists of the reentry benefits coordinator and 2 assisters. So the reentry benefits coordinator is a person that kind of oversees the program and making sure that all of the SNAP and OHP applications are submitted. And then they also head up the Social Security application process. So DOC has an availability, and there's a process to where if someone has severe mental or physical disabilities, that they can start the Social Security, whether it's SSD or SSI application, and also general assistance, the GA application pre-release, so that upon release they can have their benefits in order. This is a pretty small number of folks. They have to meet 2 of 3 criteria in order to be able to get this assistance pre-release. And this is something that we are hoping to expand in the future, is to get the availability to be able to assist more folks with getting on SSI or SSD prior to release. As we all know, it takes quite a while to get those benefits started and going. And so if they have to wait until release, then they're going sometimes, a year without benefits. So it's a great thing that we're able to do that, but like I said, it's a very small number. And so that's something that we would like to see an increase in our services, is to be able to help more with that. But the primary focus of the reentry benefits team outside of the Social Security applications is the OHP and SNAP application. So every adult in custody that releases from our care, the reentry benefits assisters, we have one on the west side of the state, one on the east side of the state, and they travel into each institution and they meet with every single person releasing, no matter where they're located, where they're housed. Some of them are done in a group setting, some of them are done one-on-one, depending on what they're talking about. And the applications are completed. For OHP, the applications are completed by the assister with the adult in custody sitting next to them or across from them. And then the SNAP applications are required to be completed by the adult in custody themselves. Our assisters are not allowed to help them with the SNAP application or give them any, answers on how to answer the questions in the application. So at about 120 days, just to kind of touch on the timeline, that's when our reentry benefits coordinator, and she goes into all of the institutions. Sometimes She will facilitate via phone call through another staff member. She'll go into the institution, and she will complete the Social Security application at 120 days. She does this at 6 months because it does take quite a while to get the application submitted, medical records requested, sent to the Social Security Department, and then to make sure that they can hopefully get benefits prior to release. In the 120 days to 60 days to release, and this is when the benefits assisters focus on making sure that the Oregon Health Plan application is completed. So we work very closely with Oregon Health Authority and Department of Human Services to make sure that we have everything that's needed. And so sometimes this requires a one-page paper, sometimes it requires a full application. And then the Oregon Health Authority, the Oregon Health Authority and ODHS, they assist us in letting us know who will need a full application and who needs a partial application. Everyone that's 65 plus will complete the full application with the coordinator. But around 60 to 120 days, that's when they're meeting with the adults in custody in the institutions for one-on-one meetings to go over the questions in the application. But the applications we cannot submit them until 30 days to release. And that goes for both Oregon Health Plan applications and the SNAP applications. So once all of the applications are completed, they're scanned into our system, then we have one of the assisters each day that goes in on the 30th day before release, and she sends in every single application to our partners at ODHS. There's a team specifically for justice involved individuals, and so we work closely with them, and we send the applications over to them every single day. And so the soonest we can send is 30 days pre-release. So we send it every single day on that 30th day, just because there are additional steps after the application is sent in. Sometimes, well, actually, a lot of times release dates change. It could be a sentence recalculation. It could be that they were offered and awarded like the ability to get out on short-term transitional leave, like Chris mentioned. Maybe they're in an alternative incarceration program, like Christy and Chris mentioned. So sometimes the release dates will change. And so if those dates change to getting out sooner, then the benefits assisters pivot and make sure that those applications are getting in as soon as possible. If the dates scoot out, so if they were getting out next month and now they're getting out in 3 months, then that application has to be recompleted and resubmitted at the 30-day mark. So that sometimes there's a lot of back and forth and, oh, just kidding, they're not getting out, they're getting out on this day. And so there's a lot of interactions that happen, and our partnership with ODHS has been really strong. We've been working with them for several years now, and so sometimes there is a lot of back and forth on what's happening. And then at the day of release, I missed something. Chris talked about it briefly, but for the SNAP applications, there's an additional piece once the application is completed and submitted. Once the application is submitted to DHS, then they reach out to our release counselors in each institution to facilitate a SNAP interview. And this is required by law. In order to get SNAP benefits, you have to speak to the person getting the benefits. In a prison setting, this is more difficult than if they were in the community and you can just call the person and have that conversation over the phone. In prison, they're not able to take incoming calls. And so this has to be pre-planned. Some of the institutions have a phone booth that they're able to connect with. A lot of the institutions, the release counselor sits down with them while they're, in the same room and allows them to either get on a Teams call or on a phone call with the DHS worker, and they go through the application and just verify their income, all of the different things that make them eligible for SNAP benefits upon release. Sometimes that interview can go 15 to 20 minutes. Sometimes it's up to 45 minutes. And so there's several different, it's a variety of how long that takes, and that is pretty time extensive in terms of making sure that the AIC or the adult in custody gets that service. But so it's a big load, but our team has then awesome at making sure that that gets done. And then ideally, the day of release, they have SNAP benefits on their Oregon Trail card that Chris mentioned that they release with. And then they also, our reentry benefits coordinator, she checks every single day to make sure that they have every AIC, adult in custody, that has released today, they have their OHP benefits are active. And so that's really nice because sometimes things fall through the cracks. And so just making sure every day that, okay, whoever got out today, we want to make sure that they have their Oregon Health Plan benefits active. And they do have, just like everyone else that has OHP benefits, health insurance benefits, that is active on day of release. If it's not, then the reentry benefits coordinator can, coordinates with Oregon Health Authority and DHS to make sure that that does get complete for them. And so at the end, we'll give our contact information, but if this is something that's coming up that maybe folks are getting out without benefits, it would be really helpful to connect with our benefits coordinator to make sure, because that's something that we really want. We want to make sure that every single person releases with health benefits and access to food if they qualify. All right. And then the next section of our team is the transition coordinators. Chris talked a little bit about them. There are 10 transition coordinators. We have 2 at Columbia River, which is in Portland, and they have a large caseload, which is why there's 2. But every other institution, there's 1 transition coordinator that provides the Road to Success reentry classes. And like Chris mentioned, also Warner Creek, they don't have a transition coordinator stationed there, but we do have several of our transition coordinators in other institutions that travel to Warner Creek every 3 or 4 months to make sure that they have the Road to Success classes presented there. And then South Fork is covered by one of our transition coordinators at Columbia River. And so they're able to at least have access to the Road to Success program. So I'm just going to go over briefly what the Road to Success program is. First of all, it's a reentry course. It is all voluntary. And so that's a nice thing is you have folks that are coming into class that really want to be there. They're dedicated to making sure that they're, part of their reentry and they're part of making sure that they have the tools they need to be successful. And the focus of the transition coordinators is to assist with basic knowledge, needs, and make the adult in custody's transition more successful, more smooth, and just help them to be able to reintegrate back into their community safely and with the tools that they need. So there's several different courses and classes that the adults in custody have access to. The Road to Success assessment, RTOS stands for Road to Success. This is a 30-minute class. It is mandatory for all adults in custody releasing. And this is because this is where the transition coordinator presents what is available for them. And so each institution, while they all facilitate these classes, there are different things that are available at different institutions based on location, maybe guest speakers that come in. So it is mandatory. We do require every adult in custody to come to that first 30-minute assessment. In that assessment, the transition coordinator talks about all the classes that are available, gives them details on what to expect in the class, gives them timelines on what to expect, when you'll be called into a class. And then they also go over one-on-one services, which I will talk about at the end, that's also offered to anyone that's releasing. And then in that Road to Success assessment, the adult in custody completes a form that has like, I want to sign up for this class. That way the transition coordinator can make sure that they are putting them on the roster. They're giving them notice that their classes are coming up. And so this form is really important because that's kind of their consent to sign up. Like I said before, it's all voluntary, so we don't put anyone in any other classes unless they've signed up on the form. And they always have an opportunity to, maybe they came to the Road to Success assessment and are like, oh, I don't need these classes. And then later they realize, okay, maybe I need the class. So then they can always resubmit an additional form. It's not like one or done, you sign up or you don't. They can sign up for one class, they can sign up for all, any, some. It's all totally voluntary, and the transition coordinators want everyone to take the classes, so they use their motivational interviewing skills and things like that to kind of show them how it could benefit them in their transition back to their community. And this happens at 6 months to release. So it kind of gives them, it seems like it's really close to release, which it is. But it does give them, if they took all of these classes, I think it's like 32 hours, almost a full work week. So it's not a lot of time in the classroom, but it does take time to kind of, digest the information. Some of these classes require homework and maybe a computer lab. A lot of the classes require like internal processing, and, thinking about what is my plan for my budget, or what is my plan for employment, or where am I going to live? And so we do try to kind of spread the classes out so they're not taking classes all day, every day in their last 2 weeks. It's just really overwhelming. There's high anxiety in the last 6 months. And so those classes are usually kind of spread out through over a couple weeks to give them time to digest and work on some of the things talked about in the classroom on their own time. The SNAP application class, this happens with the assisters. And so the SNAP applications can be completed in a group setting. The OHP applications have to be completed one-on-one. So the transition coordinators used to help out with the SNAP applications, but that has kind of moved more into the benefits assisters, and they will facilitate a class and then just, allow them to have the application for SNAP benefits and, take them from there. The employment class is 6 sessions, and this class is offered, like I said, to anyone that's releasing. In the first 4 sessions, it's all classroom. So each session is about a 2-hour class. All of them are in person. And so for the first 4 sessions of the employment course, they start off with, what is your plan? What are the barriers to employment as a person that's releasing from custody? What are some of the things that has caused you to lose a job or to not get hired in the past? And then focusing on building self-esteem, building confidence, and then really focusing on what are your skills. A lot of folks feel like if I have a felony, then I can't get a job, but that's not necessarily true. If you're looking in the right spot. So the transition coordinator assists them in kind of focusing on more what is your skills, not necessarily where can you work right away, but what skill do you have? What do you bring to the table? And prison is not really an environment that oftentimes focuses on your skills. And so it's really nice to have a spot where they can really focus on what they bring to the table, and it gets their wheels turning on who am I and what can I bring to my community that's positive in the future. And then they go over and make sure that they have a resume. So that's completed. A lot of it is completed in class, but then they have a computer lab later to complete it on the computer themselves. But the transition coordinator goes over how to build a resume, what kind of resumes are out there, what would work for you and the profession that you're hoping to go into. And then the last portion of those in-person classes are focusing on interviewing skills. So we have like multiple different interview questions that's, reviewed and made sure that the adult in custody has lots of training on how to answer an interview question. The curriculum was just updated and the books have just been delivered like in the last month. So it's really modern way of looking at job search, resume building and interview skills to hopefully help them when they get out. Of course, employment's a huge part of being successful in reintegrating into your community. And so that's a big focus and one of the bigger classes that we spend a lot of time on. And the last 2 sessions is the resume building on the computer, so a computer lab. And then the last session is a mock interview. And so this is done, the adult in custody is able in class, they're able to kind of I think I'm going to go out and I'm going to apply to work at the front desk at a hotel. So then the mock interviewer, which is sometimes a community member, sometimes it's another staff member, a volunteer. We also partner with Source of Oregon. Sometimes they will come in. Sometimes we do the interviews via Teams to give them like video call experience. Sometimes it's in person. So we make sure that everyone completing that class has done a mock interview so that they feel more confident and they have experience in interviewing. So when they get out, they're able to just go in and nail that interview. That's the goal. I forgot to mention, after each of these classes, we do have a certificate that's given that they'll be able to take and show in the community. Your family, your community, your release. This is a 1-session class, and this class focuses on how has your family been impacted with your crime and incarceration. So the first part is pretty heavy, talking about impact of crime, what your family has gone through while you've been incarcerated, and then how will your family adapt when you come home, because that's another change for them. And the last half of this class focuses on rebuilding healthy relationships, how to set good boundaries, how to know if a relationship or if a family member is healthy for you, if it's something that you want to continue, if it's something that's going to be healthy or helpful for you in your rehabilitation and reintegrating. And then we also talk about how to give back to your community upon release, the impact that community, has. Even if I don't know you and you committed a crime in my neighborhood, how does that impact my insurance rates? How does that impact, all different things? And so how can we give back? How can you show your community you're grateful for them and that you're happy to be home and back in your community? The money management course, that is 2 sessions. The first session is focused a lot on budget. So we talk about cost of living. We talk the good, bad, and ugly about what does it feel like to have to go out and how much is my groceries going to cost me? How much is rent these days? And then what is my income going to look like based on employment class and what job I'm going to go to, minimum wage, and how can I make a budget work for my first month out? So we make sure everyone leaves that class with a completed budget for their first month post-incarceration. And obviously it's going to be edited a lot and worked on, but we want to make sure that they have the skill to create a budget upon release. And then the second session of that course is focusing on banking, credit cards, what to do, what not to do, how to read a credit report, how to build your credit, what is involved in a credit score, just kind of that personal finance information. It's pretty basic information, but we also give them several tools that they can, connect with in the community to hopefully build their education and awareness around, we talk about scams and different things like that as well. The tenant education course is 4 sessions, and this is really, the landlord-tenant law. It's a lot of information. It can be kind of painstaking when it comes to just information, but it was always my favorite when I taught these courses. It was always my favorite because it's so much new information that you don't necessarily always hear. And so we, show them how to read a rental agreement. What are your rights as a tenant? What are the rights of the landlord? We go through, like I said, landlord-tenant law, and a big one is overcoming barriers. So you have a felony, you have maybe a bad rental record. How can you start over? How can you, what kind of documentation can you bring when you're meeting with a future landlord? What is it going to take to be able to sign your own lease and to be able to be more independent? We also talk about fair housing, the Fair Housing Act, their rights in terms of, if you have a criminal record, how do you talk about that with a future landlord? How can you utilize the Fair Housing Council in Oregon? Multiple different community partners that assist with that. They assist with training our transition coordinators to make sure we're giving the correct information and the updated law. So that's a lot of information in that class, but it's similar to Rent Well or Ready to Rent, if you've ever heard of those classes in the community, except it doesn't have the bond that that the Rent Well classes come with. And then the last class is working effectively with your PO, and this is helping them navigate being on post-prison supervision, navigating how that looks, communicating with their PO, what's important, how to utilize being on supervision, post-prison supervision, how that can be really a good, opportunity for you to have more people on your side. So it can go one way or another. We talk about how the adult in custody, once you release, you have a lot of control over that unless you give it up, unless you aren't doing what's right, unless you're not checking in. And then that, it becomes more of a burden for you versus a help. And so we just, oftentimes we'll bring in a PO from a neighboring county to talk about what it's like from their side, how to be successful, what to expect being on post-prison supervision. Probation or parole sometimes are the terms that people are more familiar with. The transition coordinators also assist with one-on-one services. So this is most of the transition coordinators have at least once a week, they have open office hours, and there's multiple things that they help them with. It's not just the classes, and you don't have to take a class to qualify for one-on-one services, but this is more case by case. What do you need to be successful when you get out? And so sometimes it's contacting the DMV to, what is it going to take to get my license back? When I was in this position, that was one of the first questions I asked when they came in and said, hey, I need help. I need a lot of things. Okay, do you have a driver's license? Well, no. Do you know what it's going to take to get your license back? No, I don't. Okay, let's find out. So we can send a letter to the DMV, getting that information. We can call the courts to see, if there's payment options. Sometimes they'll say, oh yeah, you can write the judge and ask them for a fine reduction. So sometimes that happens in our open office hours. And the open office hours usually happen in the transition coordinator's office where there are computers available. Individualized resources, maybe in a specific county, they need a specific resource. So we'll use Google, we'll use our community, contacts to try to find services for them. DHS, child support. We don't do anything with custody cases, but if you have a child support case, more for the budget reason, how can we make sure that what are you going to owe, to avoid garnishments and things like that. We can contact past employers to help them with future employment, housing providers, and then they can utilize the computers for resume building, relapse prevention plans, anything that's transition related, not legal, not personal, like a personal phone call. The transition coordinators really try to help on that one-on-one services. We also have 2 additional programs that we work with. Source Reentry program. This is a partnership that started in the beginning of 2024. Well, it was rolled out all throughout the state in 2024, but it really started a couple years before that in a pilot at Deer Ridge and Warner Creek. And so what it is WorkSource. We have WorkSource staff that we have partnered with, and they come in every week in the communities that the institutions are stationed at, and they facilitate anything that if you were to walk into WorkSource in your local community, whatever is available to you in that WorkSource center in terms of services, that's what's available to the adults in custody pre-release. They do have to complete the employment class before they're able to participate in the WorkSource Reentry program. So that's the one caveat. But that allows them to already have their resume, already know what job they're going to apply for. So it's an easy transition into working with our WorkSource staff. So the WorkSource staff comes in, they complete an IEP, an individual employment plan with them. They do iMatch. The adults in custody are able to do their iMatch skills on the computer themselves. Gives them a lot of computer time, which is great because going years without using a computer, you feel really behind. So it's that exposure to using a computer, building your own resume, having that autonomy of being able to do it for yourself. And then the WorkSource staff that come into the institutions also connect them with a WorkSource staff in the community that they're releasing to. So if an adult in custody is in the Portland prison at Columbia River in Portland, and they are working with the WorkSource staff that comes in there. She's local. She works at the WorkSource office here in Portland. But this adult in custody is releasing to Jackson County, which is really far from Portland. They are able to connect via teleconference or phone call with the Jackson County WorkSource staff. And that connection pre-release is really a big piece because it relieves some of that anxiety of, oh no, who am I going to walk in and talk to? I don't, but having a face and name, knowing that someone in your community you're going home to relieves a lot of pressure. So they connect with them pre-release, and then they also set an appointment so that they can connect with them post-release in person within 48 to 72 hours post-release. So that adult in custody, once they get to Jackson County, they know, okay, I can call Susan. I'm going to go see her on Tuesday, which is the day after I get out. She's going to hook me up with a job. So it really helps them to feel more confident. It just gives them someone in their local community that can advocate for them as well. So that's an awesome program. It's been going for about a year now. It is on a grant. So Workforce Partnership has really worked hard at trying to get consistent funding going forward. So far it's funded through the end of next year, but we're all working to make sure that we can keep this project going because it is really amazing to see the success. In fact, the last numbers that I received, we had about a 7% recidivism rate for the folks that have gone through the program, which means out of all the folks that have gone through the program, only 7% of them have recommitted a new crime. And so that was really exciting to see, and hopefully we can keep those numbers down. And then the Inside Out Network is the last program I'll talk about, and this is direct connection to the local service providers. So the local service providers sign up. If you're a service provider that provides services to adults in custody post-release, you can sign up with the Inside Out Network, and you can have access to be able to communicate with the adults in custody pre-release through the network that they access in our computer labs. So the adults in custody can come into the computer labs, log in, and search for service providers in their local neighborhoods. Like, let's say maybe I need assistance with some interview clothes and I live in Jefferson County. I can look at my zip code, see who helps with interview clothes in that neighborhood, and even message them and say, hey, I'm getting out on this day. Is there any way I can come in and, take part in the program that you provide? And then the service provider can also message them back. So it's a really good way for the adults in custody to be able to take their reentry into their own hands, have that autonomy to be able to search themselves, but also for the service providers to connect directly with the adult in custody. If you're interested in participating, or if you know any service providers, the Inside Out Network will have my contact information. I would love to connect anyone. If you're a service provider that works with adults in custody post-release, or returning citizens, we would love to connect you with them. And then here's our contact information for Melanie, Chris, and I for the Reentry Division. If you have any questions, anything, those are our emails, and feel free to reach out to us. Thank you. And thanks, CareOregon, for having us today.
Thank you, Promise. And Chris, that was very enlightening. Lots of good information for our folks today. At this point in time, we unfortunately don't have our third presenter, was not able to make it this morning. So we're going to go ahead and transition over to the Q&A portion of the morning. And I'm actually going to start with our reentry team. So we had quite a few questions come in while Chris and Promise, you were talking this morning. So I thought we'd start there just since it's fresh in everybody's mind. First question is really if you all could speak to the volume of folks the reentry team works with. Let's start with that, and then we'll dive into some of the nitty-gritty questions folks had as well.
The volume, well, we work with every single person that releases. So I would say I haven't looked at the release numbers in a while. Chris, maybe you have more updated, but it's around 300 to 400 a month. Is that right, Chris, Melanie?
Correct.
Yeah. So, and every single person that releases are mandatory to work with the release counselors, and they are voluntary to work with the transition coordinators and reentry benefits team. But for the most part, they work with all of our teams pretty consistently.
Thank you. So a couple of questions about just how y'all work with folks who have kind of a specialty needs population. So we got some questions around, so individuals who are releasing with complex medical needs, how does that change how you all work with them, or what might be provided to them? And then also kind of a similar question, but for our aging and older adult population that we know is just kind of becoming more of who we see in corrections, kind of how do you all work with those two populations differently?
So we work very closely with some of Christy's team. She has a behavioral health nurse consultant as well as a health services medical nurse consultant who are identifying folks that have complex medical and mental health needs that need to be addressed and supported for release. So we work hand in hand with them. They work directly with aging people, disabilities, APD. As far as identifying what services would be available and assistance available to them to address, any concerns upon release. As far as complex medical, folks with complex medical being released onto short-term transitional leave, yes, if they're eligible, and a plan can be put in place that's going to ensure that the resources are available for them and in place for that early release, then yes, they can still be released onto short-term transitional leave.
We also work with several DD group homes, and we would be willing, if anyone had more resources for us, that's always great information. So if any of you out there in the audience have places that we could place these people, we're always constantly, that's part of our transition and release specialty caseloads. That's part of what they do, is constantly looking for more resources, because the last thing that we want to do is let a guy release homeless, because that is not helpful for them or our communities.
Yeah, Christine, a question just came in actually right to what you said there at the end. And so folks are curious if individuals ever do release to homelessness. And I think there's some piece in here of these vulnerable populations that we're talking about. Is that still a reality of the circumstance?
It is, but I'm going to tell you, we have some great community partners, and they provide hotel rooms for these folks. They provide missions. The mission takes some of them. And I have had POs go and make sure somebody's taking their meds. We really have some great people that we work with. And we do everything possible to not make that happen. And the reality is, there's not enough resources for our population. So unfortunately, there has been cases where people have been homeless, which is sad, and we try to avoid it at all costs.
Yeah,
we even work with Chris and Melanie and Promises team to get county waivers and all sorts of things to try to get. There was a guy going to Jefferson County who had no resources in Jefferson County, but had a family in Vancouver, Washington, and Multnomah County agreed to take him, and that set him up for he's been so successful in the community, and I really give credit to that county and Chris and Melanie and Promises team for making that waiver happen.
Yeah, that's a great example of definitely creative solutioning for someone. Thank you for that. Folks also had questions around, so when y'all have someone who's releasing from a really long incarceration, so they've spent maybe they're really outside of the norm of time spent, is there any additional considerations that are made for folks in that circumstance?
So we do for folks that have long-term incarcerations, and currently the definition for that would be people that have been incarcerated for 15 plus years. That could be moving to be to capture everyone that's been incarcerated for 10 plus years, but currently is 15 plus years. We offer what's called a field trip, and that is an escorted trip while they're still incarcerated. It's an escorted trip into the community, preferably into the county that they're going to be returning to. It's a day trip. We take them out. We show them, take them to meet their parole and probation officer. Get the lay of the land there. Meet the person in person. Have that opportunity to sit and talk and ask questions. And for that PO to actually be able to give them an accurate, idea of what their supervision is going to look like in the community. If they're released into any type of transitional or subsidy housing, part of the field trip is to go and see that housing, be able to get a tour of it, and kind of ease some of the anxiety of the unknown going back into the community. We take them out, show them how to use an Oregon Trail card. Some folks have been incarcerated so long that they've never used a debit card or a credit card of any sort. So taking them, showing them how to use that, and they'll make a purchase. A lot of times we take them somewhere where they can buy their own clothing for release, so that they have clothing that they've picked out for themselves to be able to wear when they get released. They'll a lot of times be taken to, eat lunch somewhere, and it's not just so that they can have a meal while they're out there, but it's that exposure to making decisions that they haven't had to make for themselves for so long. I know a lot of times we've gotten feedback from folks that are going out on these trips, and that was the biggest piece for them, was just the amount of choices that were available to them. And I mean, I personally seen someone, break down just looking at, candy bars in a store, because just the amount of candy bars that are out there now and the choices of different types of Snicker bars that are available can be overwhelming to someone who's had all the decisions made for them for, over a decade. So it's a good chance to get people out into the community that have been incarcerated a long time, get them exposure to the community, and then for them to come back to, sadly, somewhere where they're comfortable, because they've been in this setting for so long. This is kind of their normal. Coming back into that setting, being able to process those things, hopefully ease some of the anxiety about release, and then be able to go out into the community without all that hitting them on day one.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you point out that overwhelmingness that folks experience upon transition. I know that's definitely been my experience working with folks both internally and as they release. And I think that's a good point for our audience to think about, is just how overwhelming choices, decision-making, navigation can be kind of at a baseline. And so how do we help folks through some of that, or maybe kind of provide some limited options as a way to support them in decision-making as they're transitioning? I want to talk a little bit about, there's several questions in the chat, which I think are all kind of related. And it's going to be a mix, I think, of you all and us answering it, because I think there's a combination of what your team does, and then insurance, and when insurance becomes active plays a role in some of these questions. So I think if we could talk a little bit about how your teams do or do not coordinate with primary care, behavioral health entities in the community. And then I'll talk a little bit about the benefits role in that piece, because I think that's an important piece of some of the barriers that you all might experience there.
So I can speak to getting medical appointments and mental health appointments. We have a really difficult time because people want their OHP number, and we don't get that till the day they release. So sometimes we're doing that on the day they release, and trying to get them the information to the R&D place where they're releasing from. Sometimes families are involved, and that's the best case scenario, and you have a parent's number or a sibling's number that you can tell them, like, hey, I can't make the appointment until the day they release, but I will send you the appointment time and date. And so that's kind of how we try to do it. But before that, it's next to impossible to make an appointment for these folks anymore. Yeah. Even though we have a memo of agreement, of understanding with the counties, they still just can't, because I was told they can't because they don't know which provider to put them with. I mean, there's like all these things, so it can be frustrating.
Yeah, for sure, Christine. I think that's the piece where the navigation of Medicaid, we know, right? For a lot of folks releasing, Medicaid is going to, or OHP is going to be their coverage. And so as promised, kind of talked about, folks get to apply while they're in custody, but that determination about CCO and OHP ID number doesn't come into play until later. And as folks in the audience know, if you happen to be in a county where there are 2 CCOs or multiple CCOs, there's also the complexity about determination in that arena, which takes additional time. And all of these kind of create caveats for where folks can engage, unfortunately, and who receives folks for that insurance type. Promise, you looked like maybe you had something you wanted to add too.
Yeah, just commenting on that, Cassie. Thanks. It is, like Christy said, frustrating because they do have quite a bit of help while they're incarcerated, but the moment they step out, there's not a lot of hand-holding. And like Chris mentioned, just making a simple decision on what I'm going to eat today is sometimes more overwhelming. And then you have to make a decision on where to find care and how to navigate that system. But I will say the CCO choice is made per release. So they do, the benefits assisters speak to the adults in custody on that, and that is submitted to DHS with their application. And their like prime number, their member ID number is assigned to them. But if you were to call and say, hey, this is my number, my Medicaid number, and I'm getting out, in 3 days, if they look them up, they're not active yet because they won't be active on that date. And so I think, if we're talking about solutions or what would be helpful is to kind of have a little bit of wiggle room and knowing that their effective date will be backdated. So that has been a commitment from DHS OHA that their insurance will be effective. But sometimes if you can't see that in the system, it's really hard to take on a new client, and that's understandable. But that is a barrier to accessing a lot of care and then getting assistance pre-release. Because sometimes if they don't have that assistance and they release, they won't go and get healthcare because it's just too much.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. Promise for some thoughts about how to even maybe reflect on your own clinic policies and how you might create some wiggle room for folks transitioning, because we know this is not just folks releasing from DOC custody. So we see the same dynamics in any release from jail to or federal incarceration. And I know someone asked in the chat about, so there was some work being done to expand OHP benefits and the way that happens with our incarcerated community. And that work has been put on pause at the OHA level. And we will continue to kind of monitor how that shakes out. But there are some impacts from the federal level that we're kind of waiting to see what happens. So. Not something we have available yet. So I think this will continue to be a dynamic folks unfortunately kind of get a little stuck in as they transition through different venues. There was also a question around talking us through a little bit medication at time of release. So how does that work for folks as they're getting ready to go? How can they make sure that they're leaving with their meds? Christy?
So we supply them with a 30-day supply of medications, and they are taken to the institution where they're releasing from, and they're given to them when they release. At times, something happens. So what we do is we have them give us permission to send their meds to their PO, and we usually try to get that done within the next day. So we try to make sure, and when we have a plan, so we have a plan B. So if we're hoping, we try to do it 100% that they leave out of, they release with a 30-day supply. Even our people that are having immediate releases, sometimes we're, Chris and Melanie and Promise's team are giving us an extra day so we can get their essential meds to wherever they are so they can be released with those. So we're working hard to make sure that happens.
That's great. Thanks, Christy. There was also a question earlier during your presentation, which I think fits into this piece nicely, that I was hoping you could talk a little bit about. So folks are curious about access to medication for use disorders. and what that looks like currently, or maybe even a little bit of like, where is Department of Corrections headed in terms of that component?
Okay, we started this venture, I would say maybe a couple of years ago, and we called it the MAP program, and now it's converted to MOUD. And what happens is we partner with our medical partners, and BHS does we do the evaluation to determine if somebody has an opioid use disorder. And if they do, then they are sent to medical, and they see a medical provider who decides what kind of medication that they're going to give them. We started with Suboxone. It has been highly abused. So we are now transitioning to an injectable. I think it's Brixie injectable. And so we're hoping that works better. But a lot of guys that really needed it were getting like extorted for it, and it was just had a high so we're just like setting people up to fail. And so we did try it because it felt like it might be easier to transition them to the community on those sorts of things. But we had to now switch back to an injectable. So that's kind of where we are.
Okay. And then it looks like, I'm thinking this question came in as you were talking about release medications. So someone asked, including DME. But does that ring a bell to you?
What is DME?
That's a great question. So I think maybe if someone who did put this in the chat, if you can provide a little more context, we're happy to revisit that.
Like if it speaks to injectable meds, sometimes we try to get counties and people to take their injectable meds, and that's not something we can give directly to the patient. So if that's what you're referring to, and we're not always successful about that. A lot of people don't want to take injectable meds from us. So I don't know if the person clarified.
Somebody was referencing durable medical equipment.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Durable medical equipment. Yes, like canes and walkers and wheelchair. Yeah, they can leave with all that. Even sleep app machines, oxygen supplies. We take all that. We let them leave with all of that. And if they leave and they haven't got what they need, like the group home will call us, and I've driven stuff out myself to make sure these patients have what they need. So we want them to leave with what they need, and it's not always there's like things that happen, but we really do our best to make sure we continue to follow them for a while after they leave to make sure they get settled in. So we don't just be like, oh, you released today, okay, not our problem anymore. Like, no, like you are our patient, and we're going to make sure there's a good transition and handoff. So
thanks for that, Christy. And then one more question for you that came in during your presentation. So folks were curious to learn more about, for mental health services available, especially therapy, how often are folks utilizing that service, and do therapists keep open appointments to accommodate any emergency needs, or kind of how do y'all handle any crisis needs?
Well, I can tell you, people are accessing and utilizing therapy. They are hungry for it. They want to change. The large part of them, prison's kind of a great place to teach somebody about their mental illness, because as community providers, you probably understand that you're busy a lot making sure they have food, shelter, and clothing. And in prison, it's provided for them. So we have the opportunity to help them really work on symptom management and knowing that they need to take meds, and just developing a whole plethora of skills. And they really appreciate that, and they like that. Our groups fill up fast. We have wait lists. We have a wait list for EMDR therapy, and how we accommodate clients that will have emergent needs is that we have a crisis responder who has a real light schedule that day, so they can, and they only schedule people that they could cancel and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. So if they absolutely had to leave in a moment's notice, they could. Also, like our therapists, if it's their client, sometimes they want to see their own therapist, and we're not booked up so heavy all day long that they can't work them in at some point. So we try to provide the best service for all and take everybody's needs into consideration. Like, we don't want to be canceling a bunch of appointments to get other people seen, because that's not good. But we also understand that, you know, there are emergent situations, and then also new clients that come in. But we kind of have a heads up about that, because they're in Coffee Creek intake for 30 days. So we have a good idea, and we try to, we don't send them all to one institution with mental health services. We try to spread them out, so 2 or 3 go to each place, so somebody's not bombarded. And then also, if like we have low staffing at a place, we'll kind of close that place down to get mental health referrals for a while until we can get more staff. So we do some of that kind of stuff to just ensure that clients are being served appropriately.
That's great. Thanks for that, Christy. And then I think we've just got one last question that came in. So folks are interested to hear about Hep C services in treatment and what might be available to folks during their incarceration.
Yeah, there is Hep C treatment available through medical. I am not good about the process because I don't administer that. So I don't have specific details, but yes, they have medication to help them recover. They're seen. I know that they're one of the things that have, there are certain diagnoses for medical that they have certain follow-ups on a regular basis. And I know that that is one of those things that meet criteria, that they have scheduled follow-ups on a regular basis. A kind of a thing about people that are incarcerated, there's 2 populations that are federally mandated to have health care provided to them, mental health care and medical care. And one of them are Native Americans, and the other one is incarcerated individuals. So, and we're required to meet the standard of care in the community, to have every single person that's incarcerated have access to all services that they would have access to in the community, which when they get into the community, they don't always have access to everything, as you all know. So yeah, I mean, we have a high standard. We have audits on a regular basis from the National Commission on Correctional Healthcare, and it's kind of like a JCO in the community hospitals, but we stay accredited in all our institutions. And if some have problems, we address those problems and we take corrective action so we can maintain those accreditations.
Great. Thanks for that. And I think that wraps us up for all of our questions today. I just want to take a moment to really thank you, Christy, Chris, Promise, and Melanie. We really appreciated all the information that you brought to everyone today. I think this was very helpful. I know I'm definitely thinking about some ways that we can support folks as they're transitioning back into the community. Just a couple reminders for attendees. So slides. We will get those slides sent out to you all just as soon as we wrap up here this morning. In addition, this content will be posted and we will provide that information as well so folks can share broadly with your colleagues and other friends who might be interested. And then as well, we will be getting those surveys out to folks for your CEUs or CME credits. Again, if you did not get a chance to put your DPSST information into the Q&A, if you could please do that before you head out. We just need your name, your employer, and your number. We will get that information submitted for you. Thank you all so much for attending today, and thanks again to our speakers. Everyone have a great day.